Alrighty, one moment here. I lost. Where did he be? There we go. All right. So, as I said before, my name is Sarah Kiefer. I'm the Audit Services Manager at Earth Claims. I talked a little bit about that I am the individual that manages the producer group influx of applications. That just simply means I'm working with like a top tier marketing affiliate that may have operations underneath of it that come on board for certification as directed by that producer group. I have a counterpart. His name is Seth Diem. He's not on this call today, but he is primarily overseeing the independent beef applications that come through for our company. He takes about half of the workload. I take about the other half. So you'll hear me reference him a lot during this meeting. His contact information is going to be at the end. Either myself or Seth would be the responsible party to handle your GAP certification process. But I just did want to mention him. He does a lot of work alongside of me, and we both kind of work as a team to accomplish GAP certification for our clients. All righty, so let's get started. So what is the Global Animal Partnership Program? Essentially, GAP is one of the largest animal welfare food labeling programs in North America. It's a nonprofit organization that, although born from Whole Foods, exists independently from Whole Foods, and it works with farmers, ranchers, industry experts, and a scientific advisory committee to develop and improve animal welfare standards for poultry and livestock raised for consumption. So GAP considers a few things: the health and productivity of an animal, how it lives naturally, and its emotional well-being when they're developing and implementing animal welfare standards for a particular species. So the program consists of multiple levels or steps of certification for each of the 10 species that there are currently standards for. Those levels achievable are Step 1 or base certification through Step 5 plus, and each of those levels have a core animal welfare requirement for that step rating. But not every species has standards for all levels. So for instance, there is no Step Level 3 in the beef cattle program, as the core focus of that rating is outdoor access, and outdoor access components are essentially integrated across all of the other step ratings for that species. I'm going to move this out of the way in case it's in the way for anybody. So although GAP believes that good animal welfare exists even at the base certification level, the program is designed in such a way to encourage continuous improvement, and the idea that the higher the animal welfare rating, the more animal welfare centered that animal's life is, and the more the management at that operation mimics the animal's natural environment. So in the GAP program, every operation receives an on-site inspection each audit cycle, which is generally every 15 months. And that is designed in such a way so that in a 4-year time frame, the operation will have been audited through all different seasons. GAP currently has 3 accredited organizations that exist as certifiers for the program. We have LRQA based in the UK, and they're primarily performing poultry audits within their region. There's Livestock Integrity Solutions Australasia, which is based in Australia and New Zealand. They're mainly certifying sheep and beef operations. And then finally, there's Earth Claims, which is the company I work for. We're based here in the US, and we are the premier certifier in North America and the Caribbean. So in recognition of our expertise and the quality of our work, we've grown to become the exclusive GAP certifier in this area. We conduct around 3,000 GAP inspections annually, roughly half of which are independent beef cattle operations. We're selecting and hiring auditors with animal science degrees and solid on-farm relevant experience in the species that they're auditing. And we ourselves are all kinds of kinds. Our team is fully equipped to work with a wide variety of production sizes and systems, from very large scale operations to smaller family farms in remote regions. So this pie chart represents the breakdown of GAP certifications that Earth Claims issued in 2023. The bulk of our work in green is the beef certifications, coming in at about 45% of overall certificates that were issued last year. In a close second, we have chicken, which is at 27%, followed by pig at 19. And then that fourth slice represents turkey, bison, sheep, and dairy operations at about 9%. If we take that data a step further and we're examining just the GAP certification spread in California, we have in the neighborhood of 160 farms that are certified in the state as of August 12th. That's when I ran the numbers. So it's about 164 operations in total that we're certifying. And again, a little over half of those are independent beef cattle producers. Again, independent meaning they are not obligated to sell their animals through an affiliated group or marketing arm, and they have the freedom to choose wherever they are going to market their cattle. They are achieving certification on their own volition. About 6 of those operations in the beef data are producing cattle under a marketing affiliate, so they are associated with a producer group. Followed by that, we have chicken and turkey coming in with a handful of certifications. We are working with a couple of producer groups in the state of California for GAP. And then only a small number of sheep operations currently exist that are GAP certified, and just one pig operation currently in California as well. So why would you consider GAP certification? Well, as a producer, if you're going the extra mile in terms of ensuring that your animals are being raised respectfully and with care, it shouldn't be without the recognition of your additional time and efforts in doing that. When your management focuses on components of animal welfare, that resulting product is one of higher quality and flavor. And often when we're speaking with prospective producers, we're discovering in those initial conversations that there's already standards being met at that operation. They're already carrying out GAP practices and just not being recognized for it. So it almost makes achieving certification an obvious right choice because it gives you a voice of credibility to how the animals are raised at your operation and how your production system works. And finally, over the past several years, we're seeing that animals with value-added claims are consistently garnering higher premiums than traditional commodity animals at sale time. Consumers tend to drive the market, and with the ever-increasing desire for the buyer to understand how their food was raised, that demand for transparent label claims and certification becomes more prevalent. So, what makes GAP stand out from other certification programs for animal welfare? GAP takes an every farm, every cycle audit approach in which the operation that is certified has gone through an on-site inspection, and the certifier has substantiated compliance for all the farms that have received a GAP certificate. We talked about that tiered certification program being implemented, which offers the ability for operations to kind of work their way up the ladder and improve in their animal welfare at their own management. And that tiered structure is actually really helpful when we are working with operations who may be hoping to come in at a particular step rating, but may not be meeting all of the requirements for that step level. So they are then just awarded the next highest achievable rating for their operation. It's not a pass or fail system. GAP's also using independent third-party certifiers who have to become accredited to perform their audits, which maintains the integrity of their program. Other animal welfare certification programs may only require a sample of their farms to be inspected, but it still results in 100% certification for the operations wanting to achieve the program. It's also a pass-fail system. There's no tiered certification model that exists there. And without the use of third-party certifiers, there is concerns for conflict of interest that could exist there as well. So for the purposes of today's meeting, we're just focusing on the GAP beef program and the main elements required for each step level of certification. However, the core components that I'm going to talk about for each of these ratings do exist across all species. So at step 1 or base certification, there's no crates, no cages, or crowding. Animals at this level would be protected from weather extremes and mainly on pasture except for finishing. Animals in step 2 systems receive an enriched environment. So they have materials that are increasing the complexity of their living space. So living areas would have shade and other enrichments to entertain the cattle. Again, talked about before, there is no step level 3 for beef, as we've mentioned previously. In step 4 systems, this is the pasture-centered welfare claim. So one of the core requirements is that animals are spending 75% of their life on pasture. And step 5 is animal-centered. So prohibited measures such as castration or horn tipping, any physical alterations are not permitted at this rating. And then finally, step 5 plus, which is the higher level, is also animal-centered, but it requires the animal to spend its life from birth until harvest at the same operation using an on-farm or mobile harvesting facility. Um, for the purposes of this image, every standard that is in green simply just indicates a new or a changed requirement from the previous step rating. So if we're following along and so far you feel your operation or you know somebody's operation would be a good fit for the GAP program, we've got a few simple steps which we need from you to proceed. And we're going to go over those details as well so that you can know what to expect in the audit and certification process with earth claims. Excuse me. So the first step in achieving certification is to download and read over the GAP standards. One second. And sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. So we're going to download and read over the GAP standard and determine what step level rating the operation is likely to meet. At this point, we're going to determine if there's any modifications that are needed to conform to just base certification requirements, as that could delay the certification process if there's alterations that need to be made in order to comply with the program. So it could affect the readiness for your operation to receive an audit if there are some things that need to be implemented into your management system in order to take part in GAP certification. From there, you'll complete the application for your respective species, being sure to answer questions completely, and you'll then provide your application to Earth Claims by email. We do take in a handful of mailed applications, but we do prefer email just because that seems to be the quickest method. But we are able to track the process of receiving an application by mail if that is the only ability in which the operation can submit their form. So once your application is received, our team is reviewing that information and we're determining your overall eligibility for the program. If there's any questions that were answered in a way that would prohibit you from even just base certification, we would reject the application and communicate with you on what would need to change in order for you to be part of the GAP program. Otherwise, we're discussing any questions that we have about the answers you've provided in your form. We're assessing it for completeness, and then we're talking with the producers about planning the inspection. So we're talking about the locations in which you're hoping to certify, making sure that you have the correct stage of production of animals present, making sure that we're able to take those next steps in scheduling. We're also at that point having conversations regarding marketing timeframes. So we're discussing if you have any upcoming shipping or marketing dates that we have to obey that will help frame out the certification process and timeline. It's important to note at this level that our certification process typically takes about 4 to 6 weeks to complete. So that should definitely factor into your plan for achieving GAP certification, knowing when exactly you may be marketing GAP animals. So after that, you'll work with myself or Seth DM to arrange your on-site audit. During this process, we are discussing our audit costs, which are currently a base certification fee with the addition of travel fees that are distributed equitably among operations being inspected in a single trip. So we also have independent producers review and sign a services agreement, which simply outlines the expectations we have of you in the certification process, what you can expect from Earth Claims, and it details those travel or the certification and travel costs as well. So when we do that, then the next procedure is to determine an inspection date. We're working with you to figure that out, looking at our calendars and what would be the appropriate time to come out and do the inspection. There needs to be a GAP certificate in place prior to shipping or marketing of GAP cattle. And in addition to that, for the audit to occur, we need to be having the auditors meet with the appropriate party during the inspection. So the person who is responsible for day-to-day management, at the operation needs to be present for the inspection. And then we also need to have animals on site that match the stage of production you're hoping to certify to present in order for that audit process to continue. And then finally, once all those boxes are checked off, you're going to have an on-site audit. So the inspector is coming to your operation at the time that we agreed upon, the date that we agreed upon, and they're basically performing their inspection in 3 parts. The first of which they will be reviewing records and documentation of all GAP-eligible market animals currently present at the operation. So if you're raising more than just home-raised cattle and you're bringing in GAP cattle, we would also need to review chain of custody documentation demonstrating that those animals have spent their lives at GAP operations prior to being received at your operation. The inspector is also having an interview with you discussing animal management, how it pertains to the GAP standard. They're essentially walking through the standard point by point, being sure to ask questions of you that relate to compliance, while also studying and reviewing record-keeping mechanisms that are employed by the operation as well. And then they're also discussing hypothetical situations and kind of walking through, certain scenarios and seeing how those answers are provided and how they check off with the GAP program as well. And then the third component is the live animal observation. So the inspector is going out with you to the areas where you have animals that are eligible for the program, and they are assessing animal condition, living environments, talking with you about that as well. So after the inspection takes place, the auditor passes those findings along to the review team who is assessing them for compliance. If there's any potential nonconformances found at the time of the audit, this is where those would be submitted to the person who has continued with the audit process, and they have a chance to provide corrective action, which is typically done within 21 days of receiving the RFI. And then once all nonconformances are remedied, or if there weren't any found at the time of the audit to begin with, we are then able to issue a certificate decision. And that certificate indicates your step level rating, as well as the locations where you raise GAP animals. And it's typically good for a 15-month length unless we have a unique situation like an extension being issued to the operation's current certificate or any other extenuating circumstance. That certificate has to travel with all loads of animals being shipped or marketed as GAP certified. And then your operations responsibility is just to maintain GAP practices at the step level you've been awarded. And we are typically in contact with you about 90 to 120 days prior to expiry to discuss your certification renewal. I'm not sure what happened. I might have just accidentally clicked out of that. But essentially, that was the end of my presentation. I just wanted to navigate to my last page as it shows some contact information. Let me go ahead and share that really quickly.
That'd be great. There it is.
Alrighty. So you can contact our office with any questions. The numbers listed here are how we can be of service to you. We do have separate departments, an East Coast office, which is mainly where the management team exists, a West Coast office. We have some members of our review team that staff that office. The numbers do call the same lines, though. My information is listed here, as well as my email address, and my counterpart Seth's email address is listed as well. And we also have the Global Animal Partnership website, as well as the Earth Claims website. When you contact us, if you let us know that you are part of the Rancher Network call, that would just kind of help me put a face to a place, essentially, and then I'll kind of know where you are in terms of understanding where you might be in the recertification, or excuse me, the certification process, and then we can direct you appropriately to the right department and get you started with the process. Okay.
Great.
Any
Thanks.
questions?
Nice.
I have a couple questions, Sarah.
Yeah.
Well, first, thanks for the presentation. That was great. First question is, I don't know that we've really seen these kind of stepped certifications. Are producers actually seeing price premiums the higher up those steps that they get? Do consumers actually pay attention to those different steps?
That is probably a better question. Seth would know how to answer you right away because he is so in tune with the way that the video sales end up playing out over the summer for cattle markets. I'm probably not the best suited to answer that, but just in the nature of the way that I see certification take place here at Earth Claims, they tend to stick around the same step rating. So for cattle, steps 1 and 4 typically bring in are typically part of the demand. I can't say to whether they bring in one brings in more than the other. In general, I just know the process of having certification is it generally yields a higher premium. In terms of like the back end, the marketing end, I wouldn't quite know the in-depth details of what that looks like just because I'm simply not part of it. On the certification and Earth Claims primarily is helping those people get across the finish line. We know a little bit about the way the cattle markets play out because my counterpart is so in tune with that and the central contact for working with a lot of the sale reps and the companies themselves in determining who's certified, what's bringing in at sales, who's watching the sales to determine if they're going to go ahead and get certified for the later ones. So I'm probably not best suited to answer that question in terms of differences in premiums between step ratings. I just know what typically seems to be popular, and in general, that most of the time it is bringing in a higher premium than conventional cattle.
Right. Then the second question is, you have 80 something ranchers or something like that in California. Is that public information? Is that information you can provide us, or is that proprietary? And
so unfortunately, it is proprietary. We are not permitted to share information about our clients. Speaking regionally, though, we have a concentration in Central and Northern California. Is where we typically see our operations come through for certification. We have very few in the Southern region. But California is, as you know, is a very big state. So even just having that concentration central and northward, serves to represent those operations that are pretty well spread throughout that area.
Right. One of our charters is building an information platform about all of this. So any data that we can get, we try to put in there, but understood that it's proprietary.
Matt has a question.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for the thorough summary. What's your sort of approach to relatively complex cattle operations? So I know you guys work with some folks that have multiple leases, multiple pieces of land sort of scattered throughout the state that are finishing at different times of the year. So how does the audit process or sort of the 15-month renewal work if you have to go to different places? And does that affect the base charge, or would that just affect the auditing cost for travel?
So that is an excellent twofold question. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm getting sick. I also have a 2-year-old that seems to bring in a new sickness from daycare every day. And we're just, working through the challenges of that. So I apologize. But very great question. When we have larger complexes that will manage cattle at different sites depending on the time of the year for summer, winter grazing, housing, what have you. At the time of the initial audit, we typically try to see all of the locations where gap cattle are raised and are currently present. So if there is an operation in Northern California that may have grazing lands in Southern California, which is an incredible distance away from the main operation and would take an astronomical amount of time and definitely more than a day to inspect, we would only be factoring in that part of the audit if there were cattle present at both locations. We don't often run into that, and I feel the reason we don't is because a lot of times when we have new operations coming on board, it's during the summertime when they're over and they're reviewing the way that video sales are taking place and the outcomes of selling gap cattle and determining at that point if they're going to then become gap certified. And so they don't typically have cattle widespread throughout all of those various or drastic locations, I should say. And so it's very rare that we run into a situation where we do have to cover all grounds and see cattle at all locations, because it's not often that they are. But in the event that they were, we would have to factor that into the inspection process. We would, at the initial audit, need to see all the locations where gap cattle are currently present. And we would make sure that that's arranged during the inspection trip. In subsequent audit years at the renewal and in years to come, depending on the locations that were observed at the first or second audit, we just need to see 50% of the locations that are certified for the operation, again, as long as they have GAP cattle present. So it's odd because it doesn't seem like it would work out pretty nicely, but it really does. There are very few instances where we are having to schedule audits that are, just all over creation. In terms of cost, though, as you said, the base fee of certification would not change. However, depending on the vastness of the distances between those locations, we may be just assessing that travel fee per the operation and not necessarily other inspections done on that trip, if there are any to be done on that trip. We do try to distribute those equitably, like I mentioned, but it really just depends on how many locations we're looking at for that operation, how far apart they are from each other, how much involvement it's going to be for that inspection to take place. And we would just assess the appropriate amount of travel costs, probably just to that operation, to make it a little bit more fair among the other operations that would be inspected. Or if none others are scheduled, it would just be the operation fronting the travel costs for that, for their own audit.
Great. What's the base cost? Is it the same for someone that finishes 15 compared to 1,500 animals?
So it is not on a per head basis. It is a flat fee of $1,700 as the base cost. We usually estimate travel costs to hover between $300 and $500 per operation, but it's of course in our best interest to work economically. We try to schedule the closest auditor for that respective species to be traveling to that inspection for that audit. And like I said before, if we're working to schedule as many audits that could be done reasonably on a single inspection trip to try to lower those travel costs. The way that travel has increased considerably over the past few years since the pandemic has really put us in that position to bill on a cost plus basis. Before we used to just have a flat fee that encompassed everything, but it's just been really hard to try to work that into making it all make sense financially. So that's where the cost plus basis has come from.
Any other quick questions? We are at 6:41 now, and we'll have to switch to the second presenter fairly soon. So if there are no other questions, and we can always reach you by email, and we'll be sharing
Absolutely.
the presentation. It will be part of the YouTube video, so it'll be out there in the universe. Your conversation. Yeah, I think we have to close out your presentation at this point. And thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us. And I hope you don't get sick. This was very interesting and a very, very easy to understand overview. It's awesome.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you. I'm going to hop off and take care. Be well.
Be well. You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye.
And Grace, are you ready?
I am. Just give me a second to make sure I'm sharing my screen properly.
Yeah, it should be enabled.
Wonderful. Okay, can everyone see that?
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, well, as I said earlier, my name is Grace Ferguson, and I'm a rangeland ecologist with the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program, which is an Audubon certification program for beef and bison. And I'll just be talking a little bit first off about just giving some background on why a national bird nonprofit decided to get into a beef certification in the first place. So, a little background. Researchers found in a study that was produced in 2020, so this was the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, they found that grassland birds were experiencing the greatest declines of any of the bird populations across North America, with almost 50 or over 50% declines in grassland bird populations overall. An iconic grassland bird that's experienced great declines has been the western meadowlark, which I think 1 in 4 birds are around today that would have been around in 1970. So it's a pretty stark decline. A little bit about grasslands, and I made this pretty general for the national program. The US on average loses about 2.5 million acres of grasslands every year. So for wondering why grassland birds might be declining, they're obviously losing a lot of habitat. That's been about 32 million acres lost since 2012 between the US and Canada. A lot of this loss is due to conversion to crops, development, invasive species moving in, climate change. All of these are greatly impacting the quality and quantity of grasslands across the United States. As of October 2021, more than 90% of the remaining 360 million acres of grasslands are privately owned. So again, setting the stage for why Audubon would get involved with a certification program for ranching. If most of the remaining grasslands are being managed by ranchers or people involved in the agriculture industry and grazers, then it's important to partner with them in order to protect these remaining grasslands. Another setting the stage, ranchers tend to be land rich and cash poor. So this program is trying to offer one of the only economic incentives for good land stewardship practices. So again, a little bit about the program. This is just capitalizing on this opportunity of private lands to conserve grassland habitat. We're through this certification on beef and bison, we're connecting consumers to sustainable management of rangeland habitat and ecosystem services, which again is a super unique program. So instead of typical food certification programs, this is really specific on increasing habitat and making rangelands and grasslands across the US more sustainable and productive. The way that Audubon does this is that they work directly with local ranchers to manage their land sustainably. These ranchers enrolled in the program get the certificate, or they're able to put the seal on their beef and bison products to say that it's been raised on bird-friendly land. The Audubon name is known nationally to be a supporter of birds, and so it's a great way for ranchers to communicate the quality of their product. This helps connect ranchers to premium markets, and we're able to offer regional and national promotion of the ACR seal. So instead of local grass-fed producers having to market for themselves, direct sale to their community, we are able to elevate their sales and promote them and the program nationally. So just a few elements of the program. In order to gain interest, the first step of the program is for ranchers to fill out a questionnaire, which they can get if they contact one of us. And this just has the ranchers fill out some questions about their operation, the size of their operation, and their interest and background in ranching sustainably or conservation practices. And this just helps us determine how suitable they are for the program and helps us triage a bit because there's been so much interest in the program and we're a pretty small team. So this allows us to pick kind of the most suitable candidates at any given time to enroll in the program. Once the questionnaire has been filled out and the rancher has been selected for certification, one of us, so that's my main role in the organization, is to write these habitat management plans. They're unique to every certified ranch. And I'll go into a little bit more on the habitat management plans in a minute. Once the management plans are written, the landowner or rancher will have to comply with several program protocols that are then certified by a third-party auditor, Food Alliance. We then do bird and vegetation and soil monitoring at a minimum of every 3 years on the ranchers in our program. And throughout a rancher certification in the program, we remain a strong partner, helping to connect that rancher not only to local community markets, financial resources for habitat enhancement projects, and connect them to their local conservation community. And an important note about the program in general is that it is entirely voluntary. We don't force anyone into the program. And it is free to producers. So at the moment, Audubon is covering all audit costs and monitoring costs for the program. So as I said, one of the first steps to being enrolled in the program are these habitat management plans. If any of you are familiar with carbon farm plans, these are much the same. The basic concept is that there is a section dedicated to the background of the property. So we cover the soils, the hydrology, the vegetation, and a little bit about the historical and current management of the property in order to set the stage for both a selection of priority bird species and their habitats, as well as a set of management goals and objectives that we outline for. In each of these plans, we typically want to be 3 years of management goals and objectives, and then they will be updated regularly. So these are living documents similar to carbon farm plans. And the idea is to help ranchers or landowners get on track to meet any of the protocols that they have not yet met initially, and also to achieve the best habitat quality possible on their ranches. So these habitat management plans are developed in collaboration. It's not silo. It's not about me or any other rangeland ecologist telling the rancher exactly what to do. The goal is that it's a document that supports what the landowner or rancher already has in mind. Again, a lot of the people that we work with are already excellent stewards of the land that they're owning or ranching on. And so we are just there to help them achieve their goals and provide some technical assistance and feedback. We also outreach to other local conservation professionals to get as much professional feedback on these goals and objectives as possible. Once the habitat management plan is written, the other element of the program are the protocols. There are 3 pillars of our protocols. The first is habitat management. So that's where the habitat management plan fits in. And that is just the purpose of these protocols are to address site-specific habitat goals and management actions that benefit target grassland bird species. These goals can be both regional and national. The animal health and welfare goals, as I mentioned earlier, are very similar to those of the GAP program. And the idea is just that if we want healthy habitat, we need to have healthy animals as well. And then lastly, there are environmental suitability standards in the protocols, and these specifically restrict the use of pesticides, or at least limit the use of pesticides and herbicides, minimize fertilizers, and there are some protocols about protecting stream banks and ranching practices that specifically improve both soil quality and native plants and pollinator habitat. So a little bit more about our protocols. As I said, there are national and region-specific protocols for habitat management. So currently in California, we have one set of region-specific protocols for the Central California foothills and coastal mountains region. So that's kind of the bathtub ring of foothills that go around the Valley of California. And that tends to be where most of our ranchers are located. We're working on 2 more, however, for the Central Valley and the California coast, and we'll be working on another one for Southern California. And the idea is that every region in California will be covered by a specific protocol. The purpose of that is that we are really, in a state like California and also just across the country, there are a lot of diverse habitats where grazing management can have a lot of different effects. And so we just want to make sure that our protocols make sense for the area that you're grazing. These protocols are also organized by year 1, year 3 and beyond, and suggested protocols. And the idea behind that is that there are a minimum set of standards that you have to follow in order to be certified initially. And then you've got a few years to meet the remainder of the protocols. So if there are some protocols that are more challenging to meet initially or without technical support, you have a few years to kind of get your act together or to get support from outside assistance. And another note that has caught people, or that has challenged people occasionally, especially in a state like California, where it's, you know, a different winter can totally change the grazing season or how long you're able to stay on a piece of property. To carry the seal, any cow or calf in the program must be grazed on bird-friendly land or some certified land for the last 6 months of their life. That also means that if you're bringing in outside animals to your home ranch or something like that, for instance, new animals are totally okay to be sold in the program as long as they are on your property for the last 6 months. Now, our protocols are audited by a third-party auditor, Food Alliance, and they are a national nonprofit that has been a certifying organization for many years. They actually came up with a number of the standards that we use in our program and a number of standards that have been used in a lot of regenerative or sustainable certifications around the country. They provide credibility to our certifications as the third-party auditing system. No one from Audubon is around for any of the audits that take place. So that's totally just a relationship between the landowner, rancher, and Food Alliance. These audits consist of on-site audits that occur in year 1, 3, and then every 3 years after that. So 6, 9, 12. And the on-site audits are very similar to the GAP audits. They include, meeting with the landowner, usually includes going into your supply closet, looking over your paperwork, and touring the property. During these audits, Food Alliance will reference both the habitat management plan and the protocols. So several of the protocols will refer back to the habitat management plan, which is why the habitat management plan is so important. And so if there are any special cases on your property that maybe make it hard to comply with a protocol, or you've got for instance, a special weed that will require use of an herbicide to treat, but overall it will create a more sustainable habitat, that sort of thing will be included in your habitat management plan. And then the desk audits will occur in the in-between years. So year 2, 4, and 5, for instance, will all be desk audits. And so those will just be a matter of sending paperwork to Food Alliance for them to review. So last, we have our monitoring program, and that's conducted internally at Audubon. We've been working with both Point Blue Conservation Science in California and an independent contractor to conduct bird monitoring, soil monitoring, and vegetation monitoring. This occurs about every 3 years is the goal. And the idea is just to get a sense of how your management is impacting the land that you're on. And the idea is also to be able to inform future goals and objectives. So again, if the habitat management plan is about every 3 years, or goals and objectives for every 3 years, then on the same sort of rotation, we would be monitoring the biology on the property, and that would inform the next set of habitat management plans or goals and objectives. These results are communicated individually to the rancher, and then they're also sent to a data analyst at the national level that produces figures of changes in bird populations nationwide. So, since the program first kicked off in 2014, there have been 14 states that have been brought into the program. Over those 14 states, 113 certified ranches have been enrolled. And so you can see each of these dots correlates to a ranch. And this covers about 2.9 million acres of grassland or rangeland across North America. In California, the program first came to California in 2019. Matt Allshouse was the first to start the program as a program manager. And it came to Bobcat Ranch, which is happens to be a property that is owned by Audubon. And so it makes a very nice and easy demonstration site for this program. Since then, we've enrolled 27 ranches. Now, that refers to probably about 10 so there's 10 owners, ranchers, or managers that then are leasing or operating 27 ranches. And that correlates to about almost 200,000 acres or 180,000 acres across the state. In this map, you can see the different regions in California that we're working in. So this dark purple is the Central Foothills and Coastal Mountains region. And so you can see a lot of the properties that we're working with happen to be in that region. But we're working all the way down to San Diego and all the way up to Tehama County. So we've got ranches really across the state. And it's just been booming. So last slide, went through that pretty quickly, but last slide is just contact information. So there's me, rangeland ecologist. I cover everything south of Sacramento for the most part. And then there's Pelayo Alvarez, who's the program director, and Shanae Risby, our outreach coordinator. Both of them are based in Sacramento, and we're about to hire a new rangeland ecologist to fill Matt's shoes for Northern California. If you're interested at all in more information on the program, you can visit our website, and we've got links to some of the ranchers that are enrolled, and more information on the questionnaire and stuff like that. So, any questions?
I don't know if you can hear me. This is Michael Dimmick. My internet's really bad tonight, so I'm off screen. Am I frozen?
Oh, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. So yeah, it seems like I was surprised by the number of Southern California ranches you have. And are those spread between Santa Barbara, San Luis, and Ventura counties? Where are those?
Yeah, so we've actually got one that we're working with. So the blue dots are ranches that we're currently enrolling. So that means that they're somewhere in the process of getting their habitat management plan written or waiting for an audit. And so we've got one ranch that we're working with in San Diego County, and another ranch that we'll likely be working with the next year. And then we've got a number of ranches in San Luis Obispo County, which is where I'm based, Santa Barbara County, Little and Kern. And yeah, I think that just covers it.
Is that one in Orange County? Listed?
Yes, there is a ranch that has expressed interest in Orange County that runs grass-fed beef, and it's as you might expect, not a super secure grazing location. So we're not sure if they're going to end up being a good fit for the program or not at this point.
Are they leasing ground, or is it public lands they're working?
Yeah, they're leasing ground, and then they're working with the toll roads to graze toll road properties.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, interesting. Yeah, we're hoping to extend this project to Southern California in the coming year, and so we'll be definitely in touch with you to see if we can make contact with some of these folks.
Awesome. Yes, that would be great.
Any other questions, anyone?
No, it's great. I mean, I'm really impressed by how quickly it's grown. Nice work.
Grace, this is Matt. Thanks for the thorough overview. I've been a part of the program for a while, and looking at other certifications and seeing markets around California. I just really think it's cool to tie ours back into our protocols. And you know, the protocols are very comprehensive, but also accommodating in a way, and really focused on that habitat component. So I've been out to ranches before that are all organic certified, they're GAP certified, they're AGA certified, and they're still not doing anything for habitat. And so that's kind of where Audubon can come in and give people that technical expertise for our certification to be either additional to the ones they have, or still cover the majority of the things that they're doing for animal health and welfare and for environmental sustainability. And so that habitat component is what Audubon brings. And, you know, it's really the relationship that we make with the producers. You know, we don't charge anything for the certification. And so it's easy for us to develop and maintain a relationship over time to steadily improve the things that they're doing on their property and try to find them funding for conservation projects on the ground.
So I have another question. You do monitoring. Did you say you were monitoring for anything to do with soil carbon?
So the monitoring protocols that we've been using are related to the Rangeland Monitoring Network protocols for Point Blue. And they do measure soil carbon, but their soil carbon samples are pretty shallow. So we're not, and what's been demonstrated with the Rangeland Monitoring Network is that there's not really a strong correlation between management and carbon sequestration on rangelands. We have, so nationally, the program has partnered with Grassroots Carbon to help ranchers nationally get access to carbon credits for carbon sequestration from practices or management practices on their rangelands. But a lot of that is happening east of the Rockies. In California, it's such an arid climate. It's just a hard
sell.
thing. Yep. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, so soil health is not necessarily, it is tied to carbon, but it's not necessarily carbon based. So, you know, the whole idea of regeneration. So, I mean, obviously protection of species and species diversity is a part of regenerative. And so when you frame it up and someone asks, hey, I want to be a regenerative rancher, how is your program gonna make it clear to the public that I am regenerative? What do you say?
Well, I think
use that word, Michael.
Pardon?
huh?
Sorry, I just said I try not to use that word, Michael, because it hasn't truly been defined yet. And so, you know, if we're specifically using birds as an ecosystem indicator, and we develop this focal bird species list and monitor their populations over time, then that can be an indicator of overall plant species health, the number of and density of insects that we have, and tied directly into soil health attributes that are good for the systems. So I'll let Grace go on, but it ties into a lot of the things that you guys are doing with the regenerative cert.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm asking is the state is about to define it, right? So I'm very curious because obviously this is not a criticism of your program. I like your program. I'm just trying to figure out more detail about it.
Yeah, so the way that I put it, before this, I worked at a resource conservation district doing carbon farm plans. So that's kind of my original background, actually. And the way that I put or contextualize our plans to be similar to carbon farm plans, which, you know, are kind of regarded as a trademark of regenerative agriculture. I like to say that instead of carbon as the focus, our focus really is birds and biodiversity. It's kind of the same. It's just another lens to look at how we're impacting this system and creating health in the system. And the whole point of regenerative, the whole meaning of the word is that we're regenerating, or, you know, like we're giving back as much as we're taking from the systems that we're working with. And so, you know, we're encouraging all the same principles, all the same practices. When it comes to rangelands, there really are not a lot of practices that someone can do. It's a pretty limited, as compared to crop agriculture or more conventional forms of agriculture. Rangelands are already pretty healthy, and so there's not a lot of change that those systems need, or at least they're pretty intact. But all of our practices are intended to regenerate the systems, or put back the same, encourage the biological health with the management of our grazing. And the way that we're assessing the success of that is just through birds instead of carbon.
Okay. So have you found, so this only comes out of, so there's a one of the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities projects, the Wolf's Neck funded project, which you probably had contact. So they're providing compost to ranchers to spread, as one of the things that they're supporting with their grant monies, providing. Have you seen any benefits from that in any of the ranches in your previous life or in your current work now, as a consequence of that, like they discuss with the Marine Carbon Project?
So I think I actually got to observe a healthy soils study with carbon application to rangelands in Yolo County, which is where I'm from. And the effects were incredibly minimal there. I think based on some research that I just saw out of Cal Poly, which is where I'm based now, it seems that there is a lot to do with soil chemical composition, as far as presence or absence of iron actually can be a big tell for whether or not compost will have a significant change on soil carbon. Also, with rangelands and a lot of these areas that we're working in, first of all, disturbance is really the big threat that we're trying to avoid. And so sometimes the spreading of compost can be that disturbance factor that we're trying to avoid on these more sensitive systems. And also, a lot of the plant species that we're trying to get rid of or discourage on the systems that we're working in would be encouraged by an input of nitrogen or compost. So it's kind of a sensitive, I think there's some areas like in Marin, where the Carbon Project kicked off, there are some areas where compost can be really impactful. But there's a lot of parts of California where not only would the soil not be able to uptake a lot of carbon from the compost application, but it also might have negative impacts on biodiversity.
Interesting. And it just, I mean, you didn't mention moisture in your description there, but moisture must have something to do with it.
Yes. Yeah. Certainly in Marin, especially, moisture has there's a big difference in moisture from Marin to Yolo County, for instance. So yes, that definitely has something to do with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
This might be it then, huh?
Good.
We went
Thank
over.
you, Grace. I appreciate you showing up tonight.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a great presentation, both of them.
Yeah. And this will go out. I mean, we're getting a good crowd of people looking at the video, so this will be seen.
For sure.
Wonderful.
And our newsletter, probably next week. That will be.
Great.
So yeah, awesome job. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you all for listening.
Yeah.
All right.
Take care. Good night,
You
everyone.
too.
All right, good night.
Thanks for joining us.